Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today it is the 25th of October and I'll mainly just be doing a general Frontline update today. And so we're just going to start off with Kherson where we don't have too much news. I will just be going over some of the minor changes that I have noted. Specifically, there haven't really been that many Frontline changes, but there were reports from the Ukrainian side, interestingly, that Russia was actually mining this town called the Hornostaivka, which is on the other side of the Dnieper River. You can see I'll shade it in over here. This town over here, which is on the left bank of the river, interestingly. And so they're saying that this is not just isolated to this town and that there's many towns along the coastline that are actually being mined right now. And this is pretty interesting because if it were to be true, and I would just remind everyone that Russia reported a few days ago that Ukraine was mining Havrylivka. And so it's a bit ironic. But anyway, if this were to be true, it could sort of imply that the Russian forces are sort of anticipating a Ukrainian attempt to cross the river and set up a bridgehead over here somewhere in this area. This would sort of go in tandem with whatever operation they would do in Zaporizhia, because we've seen previously that a big Ukrainian strategy is to concentrate a lot of their effort into one specific sector and then to move to a different sector and then push over there. And it sort of catches the Russians off guard. That's what they did in Kharkiv. And so the one front where they haven't done this yet, besides the Donbass, is in Zaporizhia. And this is an area where Russia doesn't have that many fortifications or that many men. And so if they're able to concentrate forces over here and go through these like lower elevation areas, they could actually reach some key towns. So specifically like Tokmak, this is a key junction to reach Melitopol. There's of course Vasilivka, which is really necessary to take if the Ukrainians want to reach Enerhodar, which of course houses the nuclear power plant, and so it is a very important town to have control over. If they take Vasilivka and push towards Enerhodar, and also have a bridgehead across the left bank of the Dnieper River, then they could have a sort of two-pronged attack to isolate Enerhodar. Anyway, let's go back to the front line, where there's just been continued probing attacks by the Ukrainians. The Russian sources that I'm referencing, specifically War Gonzo, who that source I'm going to use a lot in this video because he did give a pretty good summary. And War Gonzo, obviously it's pro-Russia, but the thing is they have very good contacts on the ground. And so of course you got to like take into account their bias, but they do have information that many other sources don't. And so it is interesting to see what they say. And so they reported that there were probing attacks by the Ukrainians around Ishchenko over here, which is pretty close to Davydiv Breed. We've seen a lot of recon operations here recently. And also on this other town, Piatikati, which is a town that we've seen no visual confirmation of that Ukraine is in control of. We've seen really a lot of reports by Russians day after day that the Ukrainians have failed to assault it. And so it is certainly possible that it is still under the Russian control, and it would be like the one town before actually reaching the new Russian defensive line, which is being reinforced at the moment. This is the rough line of defense around this road from Milove, really to Bruskinsky, if I'm being honest, all the way to here. And so they're also going to fortify this backup line, which is around Novakairi. You can see there's a little bit of an inlet over here, and this inlet actually does cause trouble for the Ukrainians. As you can see, they have been really not successful in advancing further south of the inlet around the Dudchani. And so if they're able to eventually break through this line, the current line of defense, then they'd have to do the same thing around Novakairi in order to get closer to Berislav. Now, I've talked about this before, but the Ukrainian probing attacks, certainly they have had success in the past, but they do come with a cost, and this is obviously something that happens in warfare. But they have lost a significant amount of equipment, and there have also been some POWs taken in the process. You have a lot of the VDV units. They've been posting these videos, basically using drones. They might be like Lancet drones, sort of strike these targets in open areas as they're crossing through the open fields. There really are very easy targets for these drones or for artillery or whatever. And so of course there's going to be some casualties, and this is happening all around this general vicinity that I'm showing on the map, although I don't have any specifics to talk about today. They're using a lot of Orlan 10 drones for reconnaissance, and then they're using these like other like kamikaze drones to actually target the military equipment. These are all relatively small in size, or they're like dropping munitions. That's another thing that these drones are doing. But that's really it for Kherson. Besides one last thing, there was a HIMARS strike right over here on this town, Kyrie. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it seems as if it was on the Lyceum in the town. And so this was actually used as a barracks by the Russian army. And in the video that was provided, which was posted, I think, by some Chechen troops from the Bakhmut battalions, they were clearly injured, bleeding. And so that sort of confirms that there were some casualties taken in this strike. I did see numbers saying 30 dead and 60 wounded. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but it did come from a Russian Telegram channel. But this does imply that Chechen reinforcements are being sent to the line right now to reinforce it, and that Ukraine does have some knowledge of where they're congregating. But anyway, let's move on now to the Donetsk front and to Bakhmut specifically, where I did do a lot of work in the past few hours to get all the units down correctly. I've added in a bunch of new units over the past few hours. I've added in artillery brigades, motorized brigades, mechanized brigades, everything. I'm going to add some more because there's a lot more units that I'm leaving out because I just didn't have time to add them in. But you can see that clearly Ukraine does have a large grouping of troops in this area. And now I can sort of prove that by adding in all the units. And so now we're going to talk about what actually happened here in recent days, because there was a lot of drama and a lot of sort of conflicting narratives. So the Ukrainian sources, they were reporting that they were able to push back the Russians by about 2 kilometers. Let me show that on the map. About 1.25 miles, you can see. So basically back to this road junction on Patrice Lumumba Street. And so the front line would actually look more like this if that were the case. But they also claimed they were in control of this cement plant over here, the Sinyat cement plant, and then also the asphalt plant. But the thing is, the Wagner forces were never actually in control of the Sinyat cement plants. That was always under Ukrainian control, at least according to my map. I never had this marked as under Russian control. There was always clashes that were sort of in between that plant and the truck store over here. A lot of it was going on around this Bakhmut substation. You can see it's a very small substation, but nonetheless, it is still there. And there's like an auto repair shop. There's a bunch of different facilities over here. There was even like a trade union building for the Sinyat plant that is under Russian control. If I'm not mistaken, this is that building. But anyway, they were never actually in control of the plant. So Ukraine always had positions over here. And so they claimed to have gained ground in this area, but the only visual evidence is from an area that they had control of. Anyway, here's the geolocation for the video that was spread a lot through social media. But nonetheless, I did see some Ukrainian sources that were still adamant that they had obviously control of the cement plant, but also of the asphalt plant over here. And the asphalt plant, no visual confirmation from there. Last we knew, there was footage of Ukrainians striking the Russian forces over there. And so we have no way of knowing if they actually succeeded in a counteroffensive in this area. If there was a counterattack, it would be very localized just to like buy time for the Ukrainians, because they really don't have any offensive capabilities in this area specifically. They do have in other areas, but it is sort of been proven that they are in a defensive posture. Their defensive strategy is really to just hold out as long as possible, waiting for reinforcements, which they have been receiving, and so that's helped them with that. So like over here, you have the 53rd Mechanized Brigade and the 58th Mechanized Brigade, for instance, which I'm going to try to find on the map right now. Over here, like these units, they're holding the ground at Opitny, and this has even been said by Russian sources that they're holding it, and there's like no way for the Russians to advance at the moment, so they've sort of been stalled. But there's actually a interesting map from War Gonzo of the situation in Bakhmut, that I want to show everyone. So you can see here there's the rail line. I'm not sure if it's still in use. It might be sort of damaged by the constant Russian artillery, which has been raining down not only on Bakhmut, but also on Kurdyumivka or Zaryanivka, a lot of these towns that are really close to the front lines. And so I don't know what's going on with their logistics, but anyway, you can see that the War Gonzo map shows that the gas station is under Russian control. It shows that they have control of a lot of these like eastern parts of Patristo Mamba Street, that they have control of the cement plant over here. They have control of all these quarries over here, and they actually have some positions within the residential areas, which I didn't even have marked. So I'm not sure how accurate this is, but there is a good chance that it's true. But interestingly, it does not show that Ivanhrad is under the Russian control. And so it's possible that there is a back and forth going on over here, and that the 58th, 53rd Brigades have been able to actually retake Ivanhrad. In all likelihood, it might be actually no man's land at the moment, as you can see. Also, there was a lot of fighting reported around the clay deposit and this garbage dump. I want to show everybody a pretty cool aerial view. I think the photo was taken from a drone of the area around the Siniat plant, the cement plant over here, and its environs. So here you can see the plant itself, and I think in the background that's just like the more eastern part, or my bad, western part of Bakhmut, the residential dense area. And then like going towards here, that's actually where the Russian positions are. And so this was always under Ukrainian control, but in the video you could see it is very heavily damaged. So it's obviously out of operation. It is a good staging ground though for the Ukrainians. I also want to open up some other photos over here. Here you can see some of the bodies of water that are sort of dividing the town. They are pretty small, but they are noticeable. You can see over here, this is the plant. Here you can see a few ponds, and then you could see, it's very hard to see, but vividly you could see over there, I'm highlighting it right now, the Bakhmutovka River. And so that's really the dividing line between the west and the east of the river, where a lot of the crossings have been destroyed already. But let's move on now to the Luhansk front. In the Luhansk front, there was some pretty interesting news. We did get reports from Russian sources, actually, that the 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade had been able to push towards Nevsky. This was reported by Rybar, and then Wargonzo, on their map, they show that Nevsky is under the Ukrainian control. Also, we have the deep state map of the, just to get the Ukrainian side of things. And so let's see. You can see Makivka is under the Ukrainian control over here, and then Nevsky is as well. They also have Svatove, Terny, Ampolivka. So basically all of these towns that are just on the left bank of the Zherebets River, they are all under firm Ukrainian control. It does also mean that they have a bridgehead around Kar-Mazynivka. And in this other town a bit further to the north, which I'm going to try to find, it has a very long name. In Luhansk, the Russian sources actually reported on a Ukrainian assault towards Nevsky, and this was done by the 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade. And so they had success over here. They took the town. They have a base on the left side of the Zherebets River, and this also implies that Makivka is fully under their control, given the fact that they also reported on the capture of Kar-Mazynivka. And so this was reported not only by a Wargonzo, but it was also reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. There was some disputes from military maps, and so it is possible that this area is a gray zone. There are some maps that still indicate this, but either way, this does mean that Ukraine did at least have some advances. They also took this town over here, Myasov-Zarykivka, just to the south of Stelmakivka, which was sort of like a bulge in this area that I was wondering about, because they could have potentially been attacked, the Ukrainian forces in Stelmakivka, by the Russian groupings in Svatove, first of all, but also from the south around Raihorodka, and also from Berestove. but it seems as if the Russians didn't have the capabilities to actually close this bulge, and so the Ukrainians are now expanding it, taking some of the nearby towns that are sort of flowing along this road over here. And this actually presents a big threat to Russia because they can potentially be enveloped in a pincer maneuver where the Ukrainians come from the north and from the south along these roads over here and isolate whatever groupings of Russians are still around in Ryhorodka or Sarhivka, and then really there wouldn't be much separating the Ukrainians from Svatove. It would only be about 6 miles. At the moment, the area that's closest to Svatove, or the Ukrainian location that is closest to Svatove, is about 7.5 miles. And so they are very close. They have infiltrated the last line of defense before the Svatove-Kremina line. And so from this road, they actually have very good artillery positions to hit the Svatove highway, specifically the R66 highway, and really stop the flow of supplies and just disrupt whatever communications are going on in this area. So this will make the defense of the city much more difficult, especially if now the Ukrainians are able to advance and actually occupy a part of this road. You do have some defensive ditches over here that could be utilized by the Russians, but we've seen that they haven't been that useful in preventing Ukrainian breakthroughs. We have seen a lot of Ukrainian advances since the original push to take Liman and to cross the Oskil River, and so we're only going to see that continue as the fighting reaches Svatove. From there, it's going to be difficult to see what happens because the Russians are sending in a lot of reinforcements. They're sending in helicopters, attack helicopters, they're sending in self-propelled artillery. They're building a lot of defensive fortifications in this area. They're sending in a lot of reinforcements. They're also specifically in Donbass around a few roads around this area. I think the road from Severodonetsk to Luhansk is included in this, and also the road from Belgorod to the front lines is included. But there are some roads within Russian controlled territory that are being currently mined or just placed with dragon's teeth. And so the interesting thing is that there's not that many dragon's teeth fortifications being built. It's just one layer on each side. And so the point is to sort of create a bottleneck if there was ever some sort of Ukrainian breakthrough in these areas. And so they would be advancing and then they would have no way to turn around or maneuver, and then they could easily be targets of Russian artillery or drones or airstrikes. And also it could prevent any sort of infiltrations from open fields towards the roads. But anyway, it is interesting to see these fortifications being built in Russian territory, specifically from Belgorod into Ukraine itself. But anyway, we have some more news from this area. Just continued troop rotations from the 14th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. I want to actually look at the deep state map over here just to get an idea of what the Ukrainians are saying. They do show that there's a very large area of a gray zone. Basically all this area from these Dvorichny bridgehead to the forests around Kremina, which is totally understandable because it is very fluid, the situation over here, and there are back and forths going on, and so we can't say for sure that a lot of these towns are under either side's control. I'm just doing the best I can with the available information, but you can see that specifically Kislivka is in the gray zone, which is not a good thing because from Kislivka there really is a good artillery position on Nizhnya Jvanka, and so not only will Svatove be in dire straits given the recent breakthroughs by Ukraine, but also some other key towns for the Russian forces like Nizhnya Jvanka and later on Starobelsk, which is a bit further to the north. They could also be exposed to these attacks. Starobelsk is a bit further away, around over here, and so if Svatove were to fall, this would be the next Russian line of defense, and it would be probably Ukraine's next target in this area. If they were able to reach Starobelsk in any scenario, they would then be able to also go towards Novor Aidar and sort of envelop the Russian forces that are fortified around Severodonetsk, Rubizhny, Kremina, and so all around it is very vital for the Russians to hold the Svatove line and prevent any sort of future breakthroughs. But really, that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.